Hello everyone, today we are taking a look at the Pavo25 V2 from BetaFPV. Uh-oh. Yep, had a little bit of a oopsie. It happens, right? But the quad's fine. Matter of fact, the full, more faster or aggressive flight that I'll be showing later in the video came after that whoopsie crash there. I did find the battery, but I had to go out in the dark, so I took my favorite trusty flashlight out, and as I was searching in the dark, I was actually hoping that the plastic would kind of shine with the flashlight in the night because the leaves in that area are the same color as this particular battery. That made it kind of hard. By the way, my favorite flashlight is the LD70 Mini here. It's kind of an expensive flashlight, but I kind of have a thing for flashlights. Goes up to 2,000 lumens, and it's USB rechargeable. I've had it for about a year and a half. Link in the video description if you want to check it out. The Pavo25 V2 features 1505 4600 kV motors. That means we're running 4S. And on those motors are the GemFan D63 tri-bladed props. Flight controller is the BetaFPV F722. It's a 35 amp, and they do note that this is the version 2 of that particular flight controller. This comes as a bit of a plug and play, so you have to add your own O3, in my case, camera and VTX. Also supports the other HD cameras, Walk Snail Avatar, and the Runcam Link. They don't note HD0, but that might just be because they haven't tried it yet with the new Freestyle VTX, maybe? Obviously, I do not have the stock battery strap, which, by the way, it only came with one. That was one component from my oopsie that I could not find. It does have rubberized battery mats in the front and the rear. Your XT30 is connected with 2 screws down through the frame. We have our Express LRS T-style mount back here. That is a BetaFPV product as well. And our antenna mount, that is a molded plastic, not a 3D print. That holds those 2 antennas. Right down there we have a capacitor. I would prefer that capacitor be secured in some way, but it is there at least. These metal pieces that join the prop protection to the carbon fiber frame, they are metal. So decide if that's a good thing or not. Right down in there is the USB connection to the DJI-03. I cannot get it connected with its current mounting position because of the support. So in order to get the recording off the VTX, I had to unscrew these 4 screws and drop it down. Not a terrible hassle, but something to note. And of course, because they sent blue LEDs, I did apply them to the Pavo 20. Although on camera, I think it's coming out white. The light's kind of a bluish green. It's not as blue as my traditional matte. And they have it set up by default to where it's on a switch. And it's a simple power connection right down there if you want to add the LEDs. The Pavo25 V2 weighs 193.5 grams. If you add the 850 milliamp 4S battery that BetaFPV tested with it, and you can get 8 minutes of flight with this particular battery, it comes in at 288.8 grams. This G&B 850 milliamp 4S battery gave me about a minute less slow cruisy flight time than the other 850, and it's 8 grams less at 280.57 grams. In the faster, more aggressive flight, you're going to find I use this 650 milliamp 4S battery, which brings our weight up to 264.4 grams. So we're not going to be hitting that 250 gram marker. If we add my naked GoPro as well as the mounting screw and the battery adept, it comes in at 248.75 grams. With the BetaFPV battery, 343.99 grams. With the G&B 850 milliamp battery, 335.75 grams. With the G&B 650 milliamp battery, 319.6 grams. Carbon fiber top plate is 2.5 millimeters thick. Camera mounting plate's probably about the same. I don't think I have it completely flat in there. Camera mounting does have some gummies in there, but it's relatively stiff. I don't know how much it's doing to dampen vibrations. And motor post to motor post, I'm getting 112 millimeters, just like it says on the website. It does come with an extra set of props, some spare screws, and a small Allen key or hex driver. Not really a driver. This is the bag that the LED lights were in. I'm not certain if that comes standard or if that was an add-on they just threw in my box. So check the product description down in the video description is where you'll find a link for that. This is an assembly and actually turns out to be fairly important because I didn't assemble it correctly the first time around. And we've got a little one-pager on our all-in-one flight controller. So we're starting with the slow cruisy flight for the original design. Nice day, 64 degrees, 3-mile-an-hour winds. And that is really rare. You might not know it from the condition of the yard, but the day before this flight, I had spent most of the afternoon out picking up leaves. I know, it doesn't look like it. And in this video, you're going to find the state of the leaves in a couple of different stages, because I did a flight outside. It was kind of a crossover flight between inside and outside. And then I did all outside flights after that day. Of course, the very first day I flew this, I hinted to this in the quick specs, I didn't have this assembled quite right. Technically, what I didn't do is I didn't actually secure all my screws down. Yes, I did assemble it incorrectly the first time, but I didn't go out and fly it. I saw my mistake early on in my assembly, especially the camera mounting, and then I corrected that. And then I found after my first day's flight, where I was seeing some vibrations, micro vibrations in the goggles, I had left all the screws like snug but not tight. And of course, we don't want to get heavy-handed with those. We don't want to crank them for all we're worth, because we'll end up possibly stripping them out or stripping their nuts, or hurting our camera, of course, if we get too hard on that. But I don't think it's really important to see all of this flight. It is important to know this is the video recorded on the VTX, which I had to drop down out of that centerpiece in order to plug USB in order to get that off. So this is kind of what I oftentimes call the unadulterated view, so no Betaflight FPV information. But I think we need to see some of that DVR view as well, so let's switch over to that so that you can see the throttle point. And as I avoid that tree right there, so you can see all the information about battery consumption. You can see the flight time. The flight time in this particular video goes on for 8 minutes and 11 seconds, but I went over because the BetaFPV batteries, the black one that I showed you there, after they hit 3.5 volts per cell, they actually fall off pretty quick. So when you see low battery on the screen, if you're flying slow and smooth, you need to hightail it home, because it does not last long. Matter of fact, in this flight that was 8 minutes and 11 seconds, when I get to the end of the flight, which I probably won't, I don't think it's worth watching all 8 minutes, but if we were to see the end of the flight, we would see the battery at below 3.3 volts per cell, and that's no good. But that's how quickly it fell off. I wasn't even that far away. I don't fly out in a big open space, and by the time I saw the battery alarm kind of being consistent, and I hightailed it back to my landing spot, whoop, battery had already dropped way down. So that's a pretty good view of that. Let's go to my kind of crossover indoor-outdoor with the naked GoPro on it. I am showing you this under the disclaimer that I didn't have all my screws as tight as they should have been. That was just an oversight on my part, and so I spent my first day of flying this, which was only a few battery packs that I had over my lunchtime from work. And then when I reviewed the footage, I was like, oh, I got some micro vibrations, so I started looking into that, and then I started finding the loose screws. But I wanted to show you this because this is, you know, kind of how it flies when you are carrying a naked GoPro. I only spent one day carrying the naked GoPro. There's been a lot of discussion within our community about whether, if you're doing real estate fly-throughs with a quad that's equipped with a DJI-03 camera and BTX, if you even need a GoPro or not. I'm not a pro pilot. I don't get paid to fly, so that is a choice that you're going to have to make. I don't have any experience doing real estate fly-throughs of any sort, or any professional paid flying of any sort. I don't have any experience there, so I can't answer those sorts of questions. That's a judgment call on your own. But I wanted to show you a little bit of that flight, because I think there's some value in that. And if you see some vibrations in your camera, check your camera screws, check your mounting plate for the camera mount, because this camera mount actually mounts to a different plate that also needs to be secured down to the main plate. Okay, now we're down to what is my favorite part of FPV, and it's just kind of fun flying. Crank up the camera angle up to, I don't know, 25, 35 degrees. I'm not sure what I even fly at. I've never bothered to measure it. I just always kind of eyeball it, and then just go fly and have a good time. Slight wobble up there at 0 throttle. We've seen that a lot recently. The tune felt pretty good. It felt a little bit loose, and it probably has to for the purposes of having smooth cinematic sort of flight. So as far as being real precise and flying really fast and hard, yeah, it took a little bit of practice. It wasn't something I got used to right away. This quad does feel a touch jumpy. Even at this weight, It's just very responsive. The combination of the motor prop on 4S, even at this heavier weight than, say, an analog micro, it is a little bit jumpy. It took some throttle management to get used to. My first couple of crashes were along that back fence line. You know, I like to kind of run down low. Now that we have that little berm that's kind of for water runoff back there, I like to go back through there as I get myself into trouble and kind of try to fancy my way out of it. Woo, good. Pulled that one out, right? But anyways, my first 2 crashes were just kind of those low, fast passes along the fence line to where I got too low and I was working on my throttle management still. And so I had like a fast tumble, which I did find moved the DJI-03 antenna quite a bit. And then my crash that I showed you in the quick specs, I had 2 like that, but the one I showed you was just more dramatic. And I think there was one other crash. I didn't crash into the cabana area, into one of those pillars, or on the cement, though. All my crashes came in the actual yard, the greenery, the vegetation. So I don't have anything to show you that sounds real dramatic, although I think the crash where I had a battery ejection, I don't know if the strap came loose or if it broke in that particular crash, though. So that might kind of give you some gauge as to how dramatic that crash may or may not have been. Again, at the very top of those zero throttle maneuvers, just a little bit of bobble. The wind on this day is a little bit low for this time of year, at least for me, at 9 miles an hour. It's still, whenever we're not in double digits, I always think that's good microflying weather. So I don't think it's the wind affecting that. I think that is a slight tune adjustment that needs to happen. I didn't go through a bunch of series of testing and correcting that. In this particular case, I just think that, BetaFPV can either choose to tighten that up or not, or we have to do that ourselves. I think BetaFPV might have a sale coming up, but I can't find any information that leads me to that belief, so I could be way off. But our flight ended as we settled to a bounce there on the ground. You can see down in the lower right-hand corner, 2 minutes and 54 seconds. Again, 650 milliamp 4S GNB battery, and you can see our battery on the left-hand corner, 3.53 per cell, good shape. So the first thing I want to talk about before we get down to the desk to kind of look at some finer details, I don't think there are a lot of finer details that we need to look at. I'm pretty satisfied with my experience with this quad and how it flies. I actually enjoyed flying it a lot. These Cinewhoops have gotten so much better over the last couple years, and quite frankly, our quads in general have just gotten so much better. The difference from one quad to the next isn't this one's garbage and this one flies great. It's more like these all fly pretty good, and it's little tiny differences. One of the things that I think that I'm becoming a stronger advocate for is when you are going to have prop protection, that it be one piece. And the reason why is when you hit something, like when I hit that tree, which I hit twice, it distributes some of the impact force around the frame. Now, the downside of that is if you break it and you want it to be whole, you've got to take this all apart in order to replace it. Now, most of the electronics are connected to the top plate here, so it's not a huge deal, but you still have some components that are going to be attached to the bottom. Like our 03 is attached to this bottom plate, and the bottom plate is going to have to be released in order to get this prop protection down off and a new one back on. So it may create some time delays in your repairability, but I think just having individual prop protection over and around each prop, unless it's on a traditional whoop, something 85 millimeters or smaller, I just think this is the way to go. I think it's going to be more durable, less likely that you'll need to replace it, and I think that's probably because it's distributing some of the force to the rest of the prop protection rather than just one centralized area of an arm. That's just a thought, but unless you can sway me otherwise, I think this sort of prop protection is what I would suggest most of you look into when you're looking at Cinewhoops. So one of the most important things about this quad is they decided to do kind of a north-south orientation on the batteries, or I should say a standard or typical. That's what we see oftentimes in our quads, north-south, typical nose-to-tail batteries. But in this particular case, because we have an XT30 down here and we've got our top plate for our camera here, those are limiting factors in what size of battery you can run. But if they had orientated this sideways to run the battery sideways, the number of batteries that would work would be far greater. So just for an example, let me turn it this way so we don't have the strap in the way and so you can see. This 850 is going to fit fine. Got plenty of space on both sides. Hopefully you can see that. We don't want it touching the camera plate. So we're fine. We got extra space. Actually, probably get a 1100 milliamp would probably fit. I don't have one to show you, unfortunately. Obviously, this 850, it's essentially the same sort of size, although I remember I did get a longer flight time on the BetaFPV. Good shape there as well. 650, yeah, good shape. That's got about the same footprint, just not quite as tall. No, that does fine. But then when we get into these guys, these aren't all going to fit. Let's start with the smallest of the group. So this one you could make work. You're going to need to maybe get the main battery lead up top. You probably want to secure the balance port down, and then it will secure down. So 660 will work just fine. 520. 520 is getting a bit tight. It's starting to touch up there, and we've got these balance lead wires in the back to deal with. You could probably get it to work. What I would do is shove it backwards so it's not touching your camera plate, because then any vibration dampening that is occurring up here on this would be not as effective, so I would shove the battery back. So 520, I would say questionable. 720. Nope. I mean, you might be able to squeeze it down in there, but I mean, it's going to be tight between there. So as far as fitting between the two, not really. Can you make it work? Probably. Is it going to work to your advantage? Probably not. And then, of course, we go to the 850, which is a different size from the 720. And look at that. The 850 fits down in there. Now, we're touching on both sides again. So I would say, again, this one, while you can make it work, your results as far as stable video goes might vary. So I think that's the most important thing when you're considering this and the size of battery that you're going to be running, is that we need to stick with this size of battery, and I'll measure it real quick. So thickness looks like just under 30 millimeters. Thickness this way, 28.5. Then our length, about 58 millimeters. So I would say at most, at the very most, 62 millimeters. But we can measure that here as well. Let me turn this around. How am I going to do this? Down like this, maybe, so you can see too. Oh, 73 millimeters might be our absolute distance between those 2 points. So I would say you at least want to give yourself a couple of millimeters for the balance lead to get it out of the way if you can't get it up on top. And maybe a couple more millimeters to keep it away from this front camera plate. So our damage report on the crash that you saw, I hit this particular arm, and you can kind of see where I think some bark of the tree got up underneath that LED light or something right there. And one of these props was pretty heavily turned up, so you may have, I thought it sounded pretty decent, but if you notice that the sound was off, as far as, I think it was this blade was turned up quite a bit. I need to get that turned down quite a bit more. But yeah, one blade got turned up a fair bit, and I just pushed it back down, and then the full faster flight that you saw. So if this didn't sound perfect, then it's probably because the pitch of this blade, or even possibly more, it was off. So a few things to note that are really difficult to see. I don't even know if you'll be able to see down there at all. There are no motor connectors, so everything is soldered on. So when it comes to repairability, you got to take your 03 or whatever VTX you have out, probably in order to be able to solder down there. That's the very least you're going to have to do. You may even feel more comfortable removing the prop protection in order to get your soldering iron down there and not to melt anything. So you won't be able to quick change motors if a motor were to burn out or something like that. That's one thing just to call out to make sure no one's confused, that these don't have motor connectors. No quick changing going on there. The screws that were shipped with my kit for the 03, I ended up going back to using the original screws because I could not get the screws that I believe are for mounting the 03 to thread into the 03 holes. I tried all 4 screws that seemed to be the right length for that, and they just wouldn't thread in. They were too big. I hope that's a correction that BetaFPV made, and it was just because it was an early sample that maybe they got some screws mixed up. Maybe that was a batch that they had tested and tested bad, but it somehow made its way back into assembly. I don't know. But that was something that I found, and I have to call it out here now. It's sharing part of my experience. The LED lights was an easy connection as long as you kind of have some tools, because I couldn't get my fingers in there, so I used a small pair of needle nose and some tweezers in order to make that connection there. On the antenna wires here, I just wanted to make sure they were down below this little nubbin, which we do have all those to land on, so you're not landing on your bottom plate, you're landing on those little nubbins. But if you do the sliding maneuver on concrete or rough surfaces, you'll find that these will rub down over time, so then you will be on the bottom plate. So something to take note as well. They didn't use any of my favorite motor wire here, but I don't think, yeah, these aren't very long. Just trying to, I mean, that's as far, here, let me go this way. Can you see that in there? That's as far as I can get them. So we're, with those 1504 motors, we're a long ways away from the prop line. That shouldn't be an issue with being having to get in the prop line. You can see that I've probably been in the grass a few times. The stains aren't terrible though, just a few little here and there inside the frame where I chop some grass or whatnot. So one of the things that I think is also cumbersome about this assembly is you look at this kind of view, is it's real tight between the all-in-one flight controller and the DJI O3. Now, what I ended up doing was a few different times I had to kind of manipulate the two different wires. So we have this wiring harness that comes out of the all-in-one that goes into our O3, and then you have wires that obviously go to your receiver as well. So you kind of have to manipulate those between the two without access to between the two, as well as your camera cable, which you can see my camera comes out right over there, in order to get those together to where you're not squeezing them, because I didn't want the flight controller to be its vibration dampening to be impacted by my O3 pressing against it, even if the wires were between it. You want those micro vibrations to be able to be dampened by the gummy itself, and if it's seeping through on your VTX, that's just no good. So when you're putting yours together, which if you get this, you will have to add your own camera and VTX. It comes in at $199.99. As always, I'll link anywhere I can find this product down in the video description below, whether it's an affiliate link or not. But you do need to add an O3, you need to add your Walksnail, your Link, or whatever video system you are going to choose to use with this to it, because they don't show any option for the video choices on their purchase, only the receiver side, which you can get without a receiver, or you can add a TBS Crossfire. But I think with the other flight stacks, possibly it might not be as tight in there, but you just have to be aware of it. It's not terrible difficult. It just takes, I used I have a little paintbrush down here from the kids' paint, and that I kind of shave the end off. That gives me a little bit of a ability to hook and move things around. You can use other metal tools, whether it's a hex driver or a pair of metal tweezers or something. Just get in there and don't be too heavy handled to make sure you don't have multiple wires sitting on top of each other, causing this to compress up against your flight controller. When you're assembling this front assembly, which is included in this little kit here, just be mindful, if you look at mine here, that this is a gap here. This faces out. The smooth side is in. That's really the only thing that I can draw your attention to here in the moment. Of course, you have to put these parts onto this bottom frame here, and then if you're going to use the external HD camera mount, then those screws need to go through as there as well. Can I see the bottom here? So these two camera pieces that are holding your O3 are only held by these front two screws on this. So you want to make sure you get those pretty tight. Again, don't be heavy-handed, but get them snug. And then you also want to screw these down snug. These will they have like a gap in there to where you can't squeeze these so tight that there won't be any vibration dampening. But like I said in the quick specs, this is fairly stiff. This is stiffer than most, so I'm not sure how much vibration dampening this section is actually doing. But I thought in the main cruisy flight that I showed you that I saw little to no jello. Matter of fact, I should phrase it differently. I saw no jello. But I don't have great eyes for that, so you need to make sure you watch the video very carefully. That is the Pavo25 from BetaFPV. It's V2. They have a chart on their website, which again, I'll link the product page down in the video description, but that chart covers the differences between V1 and V2. One of the main things is this one's a little bit bigger as far as the dimensions go, so that's one primary focus. Of course, as with all the weights, you could strip off some weight, as I've shown you here. One way to remove probably about 2 grams would be the external HD camera mount, and about another 1.5 to 1.75 grams would be the LED lights themselves. Those are 2 areas you can save some grams, but I still don't think we're going to be getting under 250 grams. So if that's important to you, then you'll need to look for alternatives. Maybe the Pavo20 or the Pavo Pico or any of the other 2S 2-inch Sinwhoops that we've been seeing around here over the last, what's it been, 8 months? Something like that. They might be a solution for you. They come with 03s, and so you can still have the same camera and video system. But if you do have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.